Back in 1983, I was working with this fella who wanted to do the Boston Marathon. I was living in Boston at the time, and he had native Bostonian simply said, let's train for the Boston Marathon. So that was Thanksgiving weekend leading up to it. And I said, let me think about it over Thanksgiving. So as it turned out, I went back to work the next day and said, all right, I'm in. Let's train for the Boston Marathon. So we wound up training from November to February. There was a marathon known as the Silver Lake Dodge Marathon, which was a qualifier for Boston. And at the time, the qualifying time for Boston was a quick 2 hours and 50 minutes for age 18 to 34. And I had never run a marathon before. So my good friend on the eve of the race simply tells me, well, if I don't qualify for the Boston Marathon, I'm not going to run it. And I said, well, that wasn't part of the deal here. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to run that type of distance at that pace. So as it turned out, as the Boston Marathon approached, I ran the back of the pack that particular year in 1983. He didn't show up. He said I was out. He didn't qualify at that Silver Lake Dodge Marathon. So that was my first marathon, the Silver Lake Dodge Marathon in 1983. It wasn't until 1991 that I did my first triathlon, the New York City Triathlon, which was, at the time, it was in Coney Island. And then in 1994, we stumbled on this iron distance race in Martha's Vineyard. That was my first iron distance race. So from 1994 to today, I've completed 35 Ironman races. 1996 is when I did that Montreal Esprit iron distance race, and I think that's when I met Joe McMahon.
Feeling pretty good right now, as you should always before it starts.
How many times have you done the Esprit?
I think this is my 18th time. First time in 1996. Thank you, champ.
Good one, man. Okay, that, Lisa, you will be coming
See you, King.
and then going.
Hey. Ah, yeah, 130. Yes, sir.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
2 to go.
2 to go. Lab number 7, almost done.
Yeah, my strategy is working.
Joe had this idea of putting on a full distance triathlon. So Joe wanted to bring it back to, let's put it back on the ground so the athletes can really appreciate the sport of doing a full distance triathlon, because it was just totally getting out of control. When the day came and he had to set the date and he was going to do this race, he said I had to be at his race. I said I have to be at your race, because the only way to be validated is that he had to be there and I had to be there. It was just an awesome time to be part of a race that you knew the race director, you knew where they were coming from.
I'm going to come up and do the Peasantman with you, Joe, and then I'm going to do the one in August, so I'll be one more Peasantman ahead of you. What do you think about that?
Nice job!
Yeah, I felt good on the bike today, and let's see how this run unfolds.
I like the idea that the run course was looped, so that way we could come back to the area where the family members were, instead of like, okay, I'm leaving, I'm going to be back in an hour and a half, 2 hours, you'll see me again and I'm going out. So I sort of like that idea that you could come back and sort of exchange with them and interface with them, like, all right, because they were counting my loops too.
All right, Larry.
There he goes.
The king of the Finger Lakes and being knighted, that is classic. The peasants revolting against whatever they're revolting against. And they're coming from, racing from the dark ages. I mean, we're going back in time to put this thing on. I think my finisher certificate says something about that, I'm now known as Sir Lawrence. I mean, that's like cool stuff.
Congratulations, Larry, on your Peasantman Steel Distance finish. Congratulations, Larry. Bow and be knighted.
I made it back. Wonderful.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I grew up outside of Buffalo, New York, in a town Orchard Park, New York. If you're familiar with the Buffalo Bills, that's where they play, Orchard Park, New York. I had 3 brothers, so at any point in time, as we got older, we could always play 2-on-2, no matter what sport it was. The sports that I primarily was involved in was baseball, basketball, and played some soccer. But when I was in high school, I played predominantly basketball. Had aspirations of playing college basketball, which ultimately that came to fruition in Division III at Boston State College. I was part of their co-op program where you're taking classes and then you're working as part of your curriculum. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the initial selected candidates for their co-op program. And the agency at the time that did the interviews and came in was the U.S. Customs Service. So I did an internship with the U.S. Customs Service, which was paid as a full-time employee. So when I graduated, they came calling, and I said, oh, I got a job? Great, perfectly. So I started at an entry-level import specialist position. That position, basically what they do is classify, assess duties, taxes on fees on all imported merchandise. So then I transferred to New York in 1984. And then I started getting into management and various different levels of the organization. And ultimately, when I retired 2 years ago, I retired as the assistant port director for Customs and Border Protection. After 9/11, the U.S. Customs Service was dissolved. It became Customs and Border Protection under Homeland Security. And then I retired at that position, which was, now that I look back at it, it was a very stressful time. But when you're in the middle of something like that, you don't realize how much of stress and how many decisions that you have to make and all that good stuff. Now that I'm gone, I realize that maybe the employees that I had made it easy for me, or relatively easy. But looking back at it, there were some difficult days after 9/11. I always used to tell people that racing Ironman is like this. A bad day in Ironman is still better than a good day in the office.